Good to see your faces, or at least your eyes. I see you back from my self-imposed exile of 14 days, but good to be back with you all. I want you to imagine how history will record a time of great division. Division among races and classes and political parties. A time when disease traveled the world, where there was civic upheaval, where there were debates on which figures of the past should be consigned to oblivion and which ones should be held up and enshrined. Think of a year that describes. Maybe you think I'm talking about 2020. You might be right. I'm actually talking about the year 451. What you and I are going through in this difficult time in all of its different facets is not new. The world has never known a time without divisions. The world has never known a time of perfect peace. The world has never known a time since the first few days in the garden without disease and death. So today in the church, we remember those who we know as the Holy Fathers of the Fourth Ecumenical Council that gathered in the year 451. They are so important to us for many, many reasons, but today I want to focus on two reasons why they're important for us. The first is the most important, and that was why they gathered together. They gathered together to clarify confusion on the most important question the world had ever pondered. Much more important than any political question or social question, the question they pondered was, who is Jesus Christ? And more importantly than just the question, but who is Jesus Christ to the Christians? How are Christians to understand who is this person of Jesus Christ? You and I have our Orthodox faith in this year, in the year 2020, because of what those fathers did in their time. They got the question right. They defined once and for all that the person of Jesus Christ has in his person two natures, joined together in unconfused union, as we sang. That he is both perfect God and perfect man, complete in every way, in both aspects, in both natures. So they got that right. And the most important thing that you and I can do today in our day of division and illness and fear is to get that question right. To get it right, who is Jesus Christ? To get right, what is the gospel? We heard how important from Jesus' own mouth today, how important it is to understand the teachings of God. He said those that would take away even the smallest little dot would be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And you and I live in a time when the teachings of the gospel, even by those who claim the name Christians, is losing much more than a dot here or there. So we have to cling to our Orthodox faith as tightly as we ever have. That's the most important thing I want us to remember about the fathers of the Fourth Ecumenical Council. But not only is the result of their work important, I think you and I have a lot to learn from how they did their work. It wasn't just what they did that was important, it was how they did it. They lived in a day and age, like I said, not very different than ours, as we might imagine. In one way, it was very different. Communication happened in their day much more slowly, typically, than in ours. If you were to unsilence your phones and look down at your notifications, you would see probably in this collected group hundreds of pieces of information that came to you instantaneously, probably from across the globe. Somebody across the ocean pressed a button, and within milliseconds, it came up on our phones. And because of modern communication, and because of our modern quote-unquote sensibilities, we tend to communicate very quickly. We say a lot to each other very fast. And we know from science that when things move faster, they create friction and they get hot. There's a lot of heat in our society today. In our desire to communicate more quickly, we think a lot less before we speak. And because we think a lot less before we speak, even while we're supposedly listening, how often we find ourselves in discussions not really listening, but crafting our response, whether it's written, typed on a phone, or even in spoken communication. So that's what's somewhat different in our time as compared to theirs. We tend to communicate much more quickly, and it's not doing us any favors. So today, besides focusing on what they accomplished in the content of their work, I want us to think about how they did it, because it has much to teach us today. They got communication right, mainly by what we heard in today's epistle. I'm going to quote part of it for you. St. Paul is writing to Titus. Titus is a younger follower, but a leader in the Christian church. And he's training young Titus on how to be a good leader in the young Christian church. And he says the following: I desire you to insist on these things, so that those who have believed in God may be careful to apply themselves to good deeds. These are excellent and profitable to men. But avoid stupid controversies, genealogies, dissensions, and quarrels over the law, for they are unprofitable and futile. There's three things I want to take quickly out of this. I think we can all learn on how we do our communication and how that communication either feeds into the growing division in the world or helps to solve it. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is when St. Paul says that believers should apply themselves to good deeds. How easy for us in this day and age to talk and talk and talk and text and text and text and type and type and type. And it's all, as we say in Arabic, haki. Air, words, nothingness. Just talk. St. Paul tells us that we should apply ourselves to good deeds. We should never let our words, even good words, outpace our desire to do good deeds. The world has enough of words. The world needs actions, and good, holy actions. And sometimes even our good words, because they outpace our good deeds, are ignored by a world that's heard enough. The world wants to see. It wants to experience. It wants to touch. How difficult this time has been on so many of us because we are distant physically from each other. I can see your eyes, but I can't see your faces. That's hard. It's hard for us not to embrace each other. So the world wants to experience and to touch much more than just words. The second point I want us to bring out of this is when he says, avoid stupid controversies, genealogies, dissensions. He didn't say avoid any disagreement. Avoid the stupid ones that don't go anywhere. How often have you found yourselves in an argument with somebody? The argument goes on so long you forget what you're even fighting about. I'm guessing every married person in the church today can understand that. We talk and talk and talk and talk so much, we forget what we're talking about. So St. Paul says to avoid the stupid ones and not to fight for fighting's sake. None of us would say we do that. But if you don't think it's common these days, open up Facebook. Open up all those other social media platforms and so much fighting for fighting's sake. We need to avoid those stupid controversies that go nowhere. And the last thing I want to say, which is an important point that I almost missed. St. Paul says to avoid all these stupid controversies, and then he defines which ones. He includes the quarrels over the law. He wasn't saying it wasn't an important topic. Even when we have an important topic to talk about, that doesn't justify all of our talk, or the quickness of our talk, or the lack of thoughtfulness of our talk. He says to us, even in important topics, avoid stupid conversations. And you and I need to really think about not letting the importance of our topic overrule us when our arguments have gone on too long and in the wrong way. So that's from the epistle. I want to bring out one more point of how the Holy Fathers of the Fourth Council got it right when they got to communication and division. And that comes from today's gospel. They got it right because they didn't just have an agenda, not their own, let alone somebody else's. It wasn't just a righteous cause. They were there to discern and articulate, again, the most important question the world has ever asked. And even if the world isn't necessarily always asking the question, the world needs the answer now more than ever. This world needs the love of Jesus Christ as it always has. In the gospel, we heard Jesus' words today. And I can only imagine that these words were somehow echoing the minds of the fathers gathered together. We heard this morning Jesus say, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hid, nor do men light a lamp and put it under a bushel, but on a stand, and it gives light to the whole house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." Not only were they not just acting out of an agenda, either their own or someone else's, and sometimes we have good agendas and others have good agendas. They were doing something very different. They were acting out of love, and love for one that they knew. They weren't talking about an issue. They weren't talking an ideology. They were talking about a person, the person of Jesus Christ. So why is this important for us? Because you and I are in a world where we are drawn more and more into engagements of all kinds of arguments, not just in society and on social media, and not just societal topics that affect us as people, as families, as neighbors, as fellow parishioners. And when we talk our talk, when we engage in debate and discourse, as sometimes is appropriate, it is vital we do it for the same reasons or same reason that the Fathers of the Fourth Council acted when they acted. They didn't act out of their own agenda. And you and I need to learn to practice not acting out of our own agenda. They didn't act just out of someone else's agenda. And this is especially difficult in today's day and age, where so much media is how we get our communication and information. And we are all, whether we realize it or accept it or not, all drawn into what's called groupthink. God gave us personal minds to join together in communion, to act in community. But He didn't gather us together to overwhelm or to be one mob pitted against another mob. He calls us to personal knowledge of Him. He calls us to do what the Holy Fathers did, to act out of love for one that we know. Everything in the church is given to us as a way to know Jesus Christ, not just about him. We don't read the scriptures to learn and fill our heads with knowledge about Jesus. In every scripture, from the first word of Genesis to the final word in Revelation, we hear the voice of Christ speaking to us. Each one of us and all of us. Not just to the priests, so they can read the scriptures and give sermons. Not just to the bishop. The scriptures speak to all of us. And they speak to us of the love of Christ. We don't paint icons just to teach ourselves about the events in the life of Christ or the lives of his saints. We look at those icons as the expressions of love, not only in the icon of Christ, but of every single saint whose icon we look at. We talk about them being like the moon reflecting the light of the sun, all sharing with us the love of Jesus Christ. The love of God, the glory of God is what this world has always needed, and it includes needing it now. When the fathers of the Fourth Council were debating and discerning and articulating the faith of the true God, again, it wasn't out of their own agenda or another, it was out of their love for God. And they did something remarkable. Because of their work, we might remember them one day out of the year. But every moment of our lives, we have access to the love of God. In other words, their work didn't reflect just their love and their virtue. Their work shone forth the love of God. They fulfilled the prophecy that Jesus himself gave us. He said that if we were to do our good works before men, the men would see the glory of God, not our glory, his glory. And that's what you and I are called to do, not just to do good things so people can look at us and say, aren't they good? But imagine, people can look at us and see the glory of God. That's going to take a whole lot more effort. Not just us doing more, though. Us doing more to get out of the way and do and act and be, but in ways that God's light and glory and love shine out on this world. So let's show the world not our glory, not just the love that we have, which we should have, but let's shine out the love and glory of God himself. Let his light be the light that shines from us. And let the light of Christ illumine the whole world, even through us. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Help us, save us, have mercy on us, and keep us, O God, by thy grace, wisdom,
That guarded always